is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Appreciate being here very much. This is another meeting of our Dallas Homeless Commission, and your service is greatly appreciated. I noticed we have Councilmember Medrano and Councilmember Thomas here. Thank you so much for your support and for being here. We need all the help we can get. That's short. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we do though, I want to just let you know I have a hard stop at about 1:53 because I've got a flight that I have to get to. And so I'm going to push it right up to the end. And I'll hand it off to Bob. If we need to keep the conversation going, but I wanted to at least give you a heads up that I have that hard stop. So we have an agenda in front of you. We're going to dismiss with introduction. We've gone around the horn enough, I think, now. Go ahead and jump right into the agenda. So we'll start with open microphone speakers. Linda?
Hi, my name is Keith Price. I'm the, I just tripped. I'm the president of Focus on Teens. I'm not used to speaking in front of groups like this. I pretty much operate under the radar. But I'm not without experience in these matters. I was the director of the Austin Street Shelter for 3 years. And toward the end of my tenure there, Dallas Independent School District came to speak to me and said, what can you do for our kids? I said, what are we talking about? I figured maybe 10, 20 kids. Well, now we know it's 3,700 homeless adolescents in DISD alone. Those are the kids that are matriculating through the system. It does not include the ones on the street. It doesn't include Arlington. It doesn't include Irving. So what we do is a prevention model. Right now, we started with one drop-in center, which is more of a social environment for the kids that find themselves in homelessness. We now have 10 in the last 2 years. We also have a permanent spot now at the Stew Pot, so we'll be able to do outreach on the streets as well for the kids that are not in school, so that we can get them in school. We also have, at the drop-in center, it's great to give kids a sandwich, but it's not nearly enough to move the needle, if that's what interests you, unless you do the other things. So we do drug abuse prevention, we do suicide prevention. I have very strategic partnerships, by the way. We supply social work interns to the schools. This year we'll do about 2,000 hours. I have a family program as well. We do a lot of rent assistance. We do uniform, you name it. Nothing is too outrageous for us to address. But there is a serious problem, and you have to get as far ahead of this as possible. Our model works. We do everything I just mentioned for under $200,000 a year, and we get to about 2,500 kids. The point is this, is that if we get to them when they are 15, 14, or 13, and not when they're 60, and I love those people, I worked with them, we have a better shot at reducing this in the long term. Economic impact from homelessness is not that they don't pay taxes, who cares, but what it does is when they use the building that you want to sell as a bathroom, you will not sell that building. That is economic impact. So our solution is to get to them as early as possible, intervene then, so that we don't have this committee later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Simmons, and I'm a downtown resident. And unfortunately, many downtown residents feel that this commission is ignoring our quality of life concerns. We're concerned that we're not hearing about short-term solutions. To that end, I'd like to see the following from this commission. Create a Citizens Oversight Commission structured similar to the Parks Board that's accountable to City Council, the voters, and taxpayers. Those appointed to the Homeless Commission should not have a vested interest in the outcome. Provide immediate, emergency, and day shelters for people living in the 60-plus Dallas encampments, while also providing relief to the communities who live and work near the encampments. prioritize homeless families and youth with transitional housing, advocate for ongoing stable funding, not bond money, with strong performance metrics enforceable by the Citizens Commission. A plan that includes more than just housing first, but helps people return to independence, not just paying their rent indefinitely without accountability. A plan that provides addiction recovery, job training, and mental health services. A plan that takes into consideration the quality of life for all the residents. I would also like to see caseworkers proactively walking along the DART line up and down St. Paul and Irvay. We have a good number of homeless people camping out overnight and spending their day at the DART station. This is dangerous. Panhandling. I was panhandled when I went to get a drink outside. We need to have PSAs from our city and county leaders. This commission should be working on that. Educate donors, etc., on overgiving. Work with Adam Magoo on faith-based initiatives. Add an intake center at or near the jail. My understanding is right now we have people coming from the jail, from Greyhound, they go to the bridge, and then maybe they go back over to Union Mission. That's a lot of traveling for those people. Lastly, we'd like to see a shelter shuttle bus. A lot of the people that don't get into the bridge just hang out around the bridge, but they don't have transportation to get to other shelters, and they don't know where the other shelters are that have beds. So if there was a shuttle bus that had a list of open beds, I think that you would really immediately help quite a few people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Charles Mann. I'm not a member of any commission or group or organization. I'm just here on my own to say that you have to maintain an understanding of what homelessness really is. It's not just a state of being, it's a condition that is produced not by the individual who is suffering from it, but by society in general. There are economic reasons for homelessness that have nothing to do with the fact that there are people on the street. Those economic conditions put those people on the street, and you have to keep that in mind. You also have to keep in mind that we're dealing with human beings, first and foremost. Those human beings have human rights. You may not want to acknowledge that. You might think, well, if they don't have any money in their pockets, they don't have any rights. If that's the way you feel about it, well, then why bother with them at all? Okay?
Thank you.
Fred Allen.
Right here.
Good afternoon. Let's talk about common sense. We're trying to make one shoe fit everything that you're trying to do. Everybody wants everybody in a shelter. You have folks out there with drug issues, alcohol issues, mental issues. Some people can't read. I deal with these issues every day. You need to determine who's on what. You need to figure out how we need to fix what they're wrong with before you put them in a house, because the only thing you're going to do by putting these folks in a house is you're going to put them in a position where they can close the door and continue to do what they're doing. You've got some folks that are homeless through no fault of their own. They lost jobs, they were laid off, they were fired, and they were forced in the street because they had nowhere to go, no family. We need to look at those folks. We need to prioritize. I would also like to say that the Dawson State Jail is up for sale. I would like to see the city, the county, and even the state attempt to use that facility to house those folks that are available to go to work now. Yes. I I think that's going to be your best bet. These other folks that have these other issues, we need to find out what issues they are, address those issues before we consider housing them. Also, folks, we're trying to put people in houses that may not want to go in houses. Some people like living under a bridge. You can't force these folks off the street. It's not going to happen. You put them in a house today, they're going to be back out on the street tomorrow, because some people have conditioned themselves to live off the land. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm James Dunn, founder of Dignity Homeless Action Network. I think that some of you may have noticed when some of us showed up at the August 10th City Council meeting the other day. I'm currently a resident at Austin Street Shelter, a place where we are blessed to have over 200 churches that come in to take care of the residents' food, clothing, and shelter. I wish more residents from Austin Street could be here, but they're worried that if they came here today at this time of day, they would not be able to get in line to get a place to sleep for the night. Indeed, because I am here right now, I will be sleeping outside on the sidewalk outside of Austin Street tonight. But I felt that it was important to meet you today. Even though the people who put away my belongings have informed me that if I'm not in tonight, my belongings will be thrown out. Such are the sacrifices that we make in the real world of homelessness. But let's not dwell on me. I'm here because I want to thank all of you for your concerns about the homeless. Now, here comes the begging, okay? We need you to concentrate on two things. We need housing. Specifically, we need 75% of the old Parkland Hospital that now stands empty, and we need 100% of the old Decker County Jail. We need them not 7 or 8 years from now, we need them right now. I want you all, those willing, to work and devise a plan to get both of these buildings up and operational by May 1st of next year. We'll begin meeting next week, and we will continue to meet until we have people in both of those buildings on May 1st to help. Please see me after the meeting. And I mean on May 1st, not putting anything off. Begging number 2. Dignity Homeless needs a couple of vans to carry people to and from apartment seeking and work. We have people that get off at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and good gracious, I have more to say. Okay, hey, can I continue? Okay, begging number 3. On October 8th, the day Texas, my alma mater, plays Texas plays OU, we're going to have about 2,000 homeless people outside the gates of the State Fair, greeting people for Hug a Homeless Person Day. This is not a demonstration where we're going to lie in the streets. We're not going to make demands. We're not going to be disruptive. We want people to know and meet and greet homeless people, because homeless people aren't the ogres that people think they are. And we're going to do this peacefully. And what I get a $659 check disability every month. I'm putting $200 of my money into buying food for my people. I need some other people to help me with the food. I hope to meet people after the meeting who are willing to do that. And last, on Monday the 19th, I will post a video to let all of you know why and how I became homeless. Understanding how people become homeless is very, very, very important. And one of the things I want you to remember most, Decker and Parkland now. We really need those places. We really need to get people off the street. Like the lady said, we have people crowding downtown, making some of the residents of downtown really miserable. And we can alleviate those problems with Decker and Parkland now and other things in the future. I want you to write my email address down. Everybody get a pen and paper, because I want you to contact me. My email address is J, the first letter of my first name, Dunn, D-U-N-N, 9950 @gmail.com. Or you can call me And my voicemail is always full. I try to answer all the phone calls I can get. But it's 214-684-9839, 214-684-9839, or you can find me tonight sleeping outside of Austin Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons.
Mr. Chair? I know that there were several people who called yesterday to try to sign up to speak, and they were limited yesterday to 5 speakers. That's not something that we've done in the past. I just want to see a raise of hands if there was anyone who tried to call yesterday to sign up to speak. 1, 2, 3. Can we please allow those 3 people to speak?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Richard?
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. At the end of your last meeting before you, Mr. Johnson, with your briefing,
Can't hear him.
we can't hear. Can you hear me now?
Mic's off.
How are you today, David? Vice Steve.
Okay. Again, thank you for this. Thank you, Ms. Reagan, for allowing us to speak. So at the end of your last meeting before you went to City Council, I was critical of you in terms of what should the focus be, what should be the top priority. And I keep on hearing permanent housing, housing first, housing first. Housing first is a longer-term program. The immediate need, as the man from DOT and as James Dunn said, is shelter beds, emergency shelter beds now. And I gave a speech to the City Council and the Commissioners Court, putting that message forward. And in there, I said the best things that have happened recently are the 10 city closing incident, and there may be another one because of the appearance with Fair Park. The city is a lot about appearance. The revelations from the Dallas Homeless Commission, a lot of good information has come out. A lot of good information. Ms. Reagan has gone out to the public and getting input. The last one from the homeless, very good information there. Listening to the homeless, the people that basically are in the greatest need. James Dunn, great work, brought 200 people to City Hall. He got the attention of City Hall and some city council members, as you can see. And he got them there by saying, come and meet with the mayor. And lastly, I couldn't believe it, the Dallas Morning News on August 13 published a letter to the editor. He hasn't written anything good about me in 13 years. And in that letter, I, again, communicated what I've communicated here at City Council, that our city and county would rather see our homeless go to jail and go to the hospital and get sick, spending almost $200 million. That's in the letter to the editor. Instead of spending maybe $40 million for emergency shelter. If you want to start seeing our homeless getting off the streets and being protected, not being around DOT, sleeping around DOT, and being victims, then that's a beginning. We ain't going to be there, excuse me for that English, for a year or two. But that is the beginning. 300 here, the Austin Street shelter to me, and it's not perfect as Mr. John has indicated, that is the beginning. And the Austin shelter is a great model to how to operate generally in an emergency shelter situation. So thank you very much.
How you doing? My name is Johnny Aguinaga. I'm with DFW Projects. We've been going back and forth with these meetings, and I've been listening, going in, and putting my input. But this time, it's more like the alternative plan. I look at it, I see it, I like it, and there should be more accountability. On my part, I stand as my skills are, I'm a builder. I'm building like crazy in West Dallas. I'm a builder. I can tell you numbers. There's a lot of nonprofits that I've been going on media asking about, and I've been trying to get some feedback on it. There's a lot of millions going towards construction that $136,000 huts are not worth more than $26,000 without the slab. Somebody challenged me on that. somebody challenged me on that property land, and I'm like, I've been Googling y'all. I've been searching, asking questions. That City Square, I mean, they said they were gonna be 3 years checking on that. You don't need 5 months. I can tell you that's gonna be a costly project. I would not recommend it in another city. They need to see another plan. A first plan would be building homes on, like I mentioned before, on individual lots owned by the city through the land bank or any other program, like they said, open up bond treasure they mentioned the other day. There's a lot of ways, but I just keep seeing that it can be more done with this construction money. So over budgeting, not looking at the responsibility of the numbers on the construction, that's the big factor. Everything else just falls in once the numbers fall in. So I just see, look at this alternative plan. Anything that has to do with construction prices, I'll do it all day for free, and I'll help you with the numbers for you can get somebody to really do some damage with this money instead of just being thrown away that I keep seeing with this millions and millions of dollars just going and 20 opened instead of 50? Come on now. That's just too much money up in the air. Yeah, I might want to question that.
And we have one more speaker. What's your name?
Is this the final speaker?
What is it?
Miriam Warren.
Thank you.
My name is Miriam Warren, and I'm the Prime Minister of Zion Chief Cornerstone. I want to just kind of speak to you from my heart. I just regained my life back after 30 years of incarceration. Today would be 5 months and 2 days that I've been on the streets. And I was discharged homeless. And one of the things that I believe that God permitted for me to be homeless so that he can see, so that I can personally see what the homeless is going through, and I can remember their pain. And one of the things that I've learned from being homeless, I want to say this to you, and I would ask you to bear this in mind. Change only starts with a decision. And the decision is only authentic when you accept the responsibility and the determination to see that change come through. And one of the things that I've noticed since I've been out living in shelters, it's not that the homeless that's sleeping on the streets don't have a place of shelter. But one of the things that I've been noticing is that the shelters is not a place for the homeless. It's a safe haven for criminal activity. And once you would drive out, if you would take the opportunity to begin to look into the criminal activity that's going on inside of the shelters, because at the bridge there's a lot of gang members, there's a lot of people that deal drugs that have the little bridge ID card that goes in and out, and they have places there, which I have footage where. Even at the Austin Street, I have footage where they mark the streets. I have police reports where I file police reports because it's detrimental getting in and out. They mark a spot on the street, and they leave and stay gone all day, and when they come back, they demand that spot. And it hinders other people from getting in. And I've made this report to the administrators and everything. In fact, I've done that this morning because I took some more pictures of the street being marked. And I've done that this morning, but they keep telling me they're going to call me back. They're going to call me back. They're going to call me back. But yet I never get a return call from anyone. So I would just like to leave with you that a change starts with a decision. And that decision is only authentic when you accept the responsibility and the determination to see that change come through. You can make all the decisions that you want for the homeless, but you got to be determined to see those decisions come through.
Okay, thank you. And on behalf of our group, thanks to everyone that's here, and particularly for the speakers who shared with us. So let's jump right into to the agenda. First item is mine, update on City Council report, and we have people who are there in the audience. We also have City Council members here. So, I mean, I think, feel free to jump in and share your perspectives as we unpack this. So, I took the PowerPoint that we reviewed, actually it's 2 days before, and we went page by page with the City Council. And we worked really through our charge. It was set up to follow the flow of our charge. We talk about the current state of the environment here around homelessness and share a lot of the information that we've gleaned from our analysis. We touched briefly on other cities and identified the 5 or 6 cities that we thought have actually made progress on the homelessness situation in their communities. And then we reviewed the short-term and long-term recommendations. The short-term were reviewed really at the request of the mayor and the city when we set this commission up. They asked us to kind of work quickly and deliver some items that they could review in relation to the short-term budgeting cycle. And as the council kind of closes out its budget, we were asked to deliver. So I think that put us under a lot of pressure, but certainly they're reporting out under some pressure to deliver some of those ideas. We'll talk about those here in a minute. It's on the agenda. But to tell you the truth, it really wasn't a very fun day for me. And I don't think it was a very fun day probably for any of the city council members that were there or the other folks in attendance, because there was a great deal of frustration. I was frustrated. I think they were frustrated because we really weren't able to identify some immediate solutions that would make great change in the community. Not only to address the quality of life issues that people are feeling in their neighborhoods, but ultimately, you know, to move our homeless neighbors off the streets, out of the encampments, and ultimately in the shelter and the housing. So it was a frustrating day. At the back end, I also shared some of the long-term ideas that we had very briefly, and I shared with the city council that we were going to continue to work. And our plan was to finalize our report in the next couple of months. It'll be comprehensive. It'll not only hopefully, you know, give us a chance to do some things in the short run, but more importantly, from my perspective, give us some long-term strategies, sustainable strategies, where we can develop some real change over time. So that's kind of how that day went. I was encouraged at that meeting to interface with Councilmember Griggs. And so I followed up with Councilmember Griggs about a week or two after, and he had the right question: where is the operational detail? And which is absolutely necessary if you're a public body making decisions over public funds. So I asked Burnett Mitchell, who is the staff lead on homelessness at the city of Dallas, and Cindy Crane, the executive director of the lead agency on homelessness, to come up with some operational detail to support really the short-term strategy. They did that. I really haven't been involved in the follow-up conversation. I know that Ms. Mitchell reported out at the Housing Committee. Our plan is to get into that today and to kind of drill down further. And really what I hope to do is to actually get, as we move towards what I hope is a goal line somewhere. I'm not sure if we're at the 50-yard line for this commission, or if we're actually, you know, on the other side of the field. But ultimately, we've got to see the goal line. And as we get there, we really have to be more detailed, more specific. General concepts are wonderful, but unless we can actually operationalize ideas, they're really actually not that helpful. So I'm going to kind of move us today to more granular discussion. I think we got to do that for all of our benefit, and hopefully as we kind of close out today, we'll have a game plan to move us going forward. So with that said, I think I'll stop and see what others who were there or observed or thought about it want to add. I guess I'd first ask Councilmember Medrano or Councilmember Griggs or Councilmember Thomas if you have thoughts about it. Please feel free to share.
No, we're pretty sure it was today. Watch you guys. We're all right.
Okay, good.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's participatory, so feel free to jump in. All right. So, other thoughts about that?
I was unable to attend the actual council meeting, but I watched it, and I had someone texting me during the whole thing. And what I found was that a lot of the people wanted us to go work outside the box. And in my opinion, I'm looking at this homeless plan going the wrong way, and I agree with it 100% because I believe there's too many vested interests in this committee that are looking for something more than a solution. I agree that the input of people that are involved on the direct line is very helpful to the information needed, but I disagree that they should be a decision maker in this process. It seems to me a little hard to extinguish something that you're obviously working on. So I don't know that that came across correctly, but I'll say that with a vested interest, I think you're clouded, and the decisions are clouded, the numbers are clouded, and it appears to be a money grab more, which I'm not assessing that it is, but it appears to be a money grab more than it appears to be a solution. So in the interest of what we're doing here, I really think we need to start bringing in people that are vested as more of a consultant basis and get a group of people together that is just a think tank. Because I know that Bernadette works hard, and I know that you work hard, and you and I have had some exchange in emails, obviously, Britt. And I just don't see a clean solution when there's that much money involved and that many people grabbing at it. So I'd like to see this commission reestablished as something different than what it is now, in the effort to bring solutions to the city council that aren't based on their own nonprofit, AKA religious-based or anything group. Because really for me, I agree with the gentleman speaking earlier, at $140,000 a house, I think we're doing something improper. So I'd really like to see us move to reshape this commission into a group of people who don't have anything to win or lose from it, and move forward in that way, rather than a group of people sitting around hoping for the commission to land the fish that will bring the money to them that they're seeking. So that's my opinion. And being out of District 7, that is the district that's suffering one of the highest amounts of this issue as we see it. We're doing a lot of talking about housing only, but I had 4 crazy people, and I hate to use the word, let me reuse that, mentally impaired people in my shop yesterday that we had to chase off. They're getting more desperate. They're being all fed in District 7. There's a lot going on in District 7, but they're becoming more desperate as we push them out. And as this fair starts, we're definitely probably going to push the people out from underneath the Skillman area as well. So we have going in the wrong direction, at least from someone who's sitting in the middle of the area that's the most affected. And that's my opinion, Britton.
Britton, I'd like to take exception to one of the comments that Jim made, and I think it would be inappropriate for any member of the commission to not have a vested interest in the ultimate outcome of our efforts. I think the question really is more about a conflict of interest, and that there may be conflicts of interest that are structural on the commission. But let me just say this: I represent Councilmember Gates in District 13. I'm a third-generation Dallasite, and I acknowledge I'm a recent appointee to the Board of Directors at the Bridge. But I have a vested interest as a citizen and as a human, in response to one of the comments here. There are 2 constituencies in this room that feel as if they don't have an advocate, and they're both right. They're the homeless individuals, and there are those members of the districts, including District 7, that have real quality of life issues today. They had it this morning when they went to the office, and they're going to see it tonight. And what we have is a deficit of advocacy, and we have a surplus of apathy, and to some degree a surplus of single-member district representation. And all of those combined set up a really bad situation for us. So I just want to say I think it's important that each of us have a vested interest in the cumulative result of this effort, and we have to make our own respective contributions. We have different resources. I recognize, I'll put it in here for the public, I don't experience what you do in my neighborhood. I recognize that. But I'm here because I want to help your neighborhood, and I want to help the folks that you see in your neighborhood. And I think that's what we're doing. So I just want to go on the record with taking exception to those comments.
Thank you. It seems like forever ago that we were in that room at the training room out of the Wilderness Park, and we were having a meeting. And I think the first thing I said was, for this to work, everyone has to kind of check their ID at the door. be passionate about the homeless issues, to try and come at it objectively, and not come at it from a subjective standpoint. Because if we all do that, obviously, it's going to be much more difficult, or if we're subjective in our views, it's going to be much more difficult to really come up with some thoughtful consensus solutions. So we, I think, tried. I'm not sure we've been totally successful at that, but from my perspective as the chair of this group, we've got some work to do. We really do. And so we can debate process, we do that all day long. But at the end of the day, our obligation is to deliver a set of strategic recommendations to our community for them to embrace and for them to act upon. And this is an open forum. It's an opportunity for everyone to say what is on their mind. We have differences of opinion, and every single idea that's thoughtfully developed is going to be put in front of the body for a vote. And so encouraging us to kind of stay the course if we can, and to work through the process, but again, be detailed in your analysis. If you have a great idea, that's great, but make sure it's an idea that's operational, and we know how to do that. Jamie, you were going to say something, and I want to move us into the agenda.
Let me make one comment before you.
I'm sorry, David.
Well, let me say something generally and specifically, is I do think that while we're working on this, one thing we need to be aware of is that the problem is worsening every day, every hour. And there are people that are suffering out there right now as we're having this conversation. So we have to progress our thinking to the point where we can finally get ahead of the curve, because right now we are behind it. And I do think that we need more out-of-the-box thinking, more creative thinking. And we need to apply that to specific options. And I think that's there for us to do, but it requires our direct communication with the different relevant parties that are going through this process. One thing specifically in regards to that I'd like to see us go further on is the direct communication and surveying of people who are on the street suffering right now. And to, actively use that as an opportunity to, while we're figuring out the solutions to the problem, figure out how to triage for those that are suffering to the point where they need immediate help right today. We don't want to see another person dying of heat exhaustion while waiting to try to get into a shelter. Now, specifically speaking, I do want to just throw out a couple of things. I hear a lot of reference to, and I can see the argument for the creation of more emergency shelter. And I think that, there have been some options thrown out there. I did have a conversation, and I think we should communicate with the ISD and delve more into that. There's a specific building, for example, on Corinth right now that's on their for sale list. I think they'd be willing to work out a lease agreement even with the city. That's a 3-story building with multiple rooms that can be facilitated and create quite a bit of housing, emergency triage to lessen the burden and kind of open up the floodgate a little bit on the shelters while getting people off the street. We need to get unsheltered people off the street right now as soon as possible. The other thing that I would say directly to that issue, I think that we're overlooking options like the boarding home and ways to engage a boarding home that facilitates their ability to be a true solution to the problem. Right now you have over 60 licensed boarding homes. The city of Dallas has an ordinance that governs them. These boarding homes have operators, many of whom are degreed in regards to being able to provide wraparound services. So you have the opportunity to utilize them as an immediate solution to the problem, as well as a long-term solution. They provide a more scattered site nature to the housing of the homeless, which I think is an important consideration, so that we're not congregating and forcing, all of the homeless people into, under one roof. And we can have operators who are there on a daily basis, also providing food for them. I don't think that's something that we're talking about when we talk about housing. They also need to eat. But they're providing shelter, they're providing food, they're providing an operator who can work with case managers, ease the case manager's workload, allow them to work with more people. So I think that that's something that needs to be actively considered, but what we have to consider is making sure that they are positioned where they can facilitate that service. So those two things I would say we should look into right away, and hopefully we can, get out of this meeting something that can be an immediate solution that we can start working on before the next meeting.
I appreciate that. You raised an issue that I think we have a gap on right now, and that's facilities. We have a lot of subcommittees that are working, but we have a lot of ideas relative to facilities, whether it's the Dawson jail or whether it's federal prison, and we don't, best I can tell, we don't have anyone in this room actively reviewing a facility solution. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm looking around the room.
I certainly think we can leave today with having established that.
Yeah, so I think let's do that. I think we're gapped on that issue, and I hate to get to the finish line and not have it be vetted, facility options.
So just one comment is that Jay Dunn and Troy Broussard, I know, toured the jail recently. And so I believe they have looked at that, and I know that there's a staff member at the city helping them to get some numbers ready on what it would cost to convert that facility to shelter space.
So I guess, the city is probably the entity best capable of understanding what facilities are available, what city-owned facilities are available, how could they be purposed to meet not only the short-term needs, immediate needs that we have, but also long-term needs. How would you see that staffing support working? I don't know the expertise. I've asked questions though. How do we get it math? How do we know? How can we put resources against this to maybe unearth some of these ideas?
Yeah, and if the group that led the shelter group, was that Kara? I think that would be a good place, if you guys don't mind, we can work with you in identifying facilities.
So I see some of my other committee members, and I think that we're very happy to do that, but we also would like to open that up to additional suggestions, not just what you're saying. But I think there's been a real lack of input to get suggestions that are then sent back to committees. So we've all been, I'm sorry if that's my phone, we've all been put into these small subgroups that aren't allowed to talk to each other. And there's people who have real expertise that are in each of the groups that have multiple expertises that we have overlooked.
Or would you think it's best to do some ad hoc group and this is a pretty big one from my perspective.
They are going to be emergency shelters is what you're looking at. I don't think you've got to include the emergency.
There may be some transitional housing opportunities that surface through some facility options as well.
Perhaps as a commission, we can maybe rely on the subcommittee for this. We can just identify some basic metrics to determine what is a good model, so that we will come with several different, we'll come across different options in our own maneuvering. If we as a commission, as individual commission members can identify, okay, well, this meets the metrics that's been established, then we can submit that perhaps to Bernadette or the subcommittee.
Well, I'd like to invite anybody who's interested in this topic to come and join our subcommittee for this specific task.
I'd be happy to.
I honestly think there should be a separate subcommittee, because I think it conflicts. I think this is more of an experimental thing. I think this is something that's untouched, we're looking into. I think that it should be separate from shelters. I think this should be looked as I think it should be
we might need to turn off the
I'd also committee to look into the schools, look into the DISD. I've contacted Bernadette, I don't know, Bernadette, a dozen times to discuss it. I'd be more than glad for my ask to head this up because what I do for a living and with my experience, I believe I could be an advocate that can keep this separate from another advocate.
Okay, other thoughts? Ricky?
Yeah, our population here in Dallas is growing, our shelter space is not. Back in the day, if you need a contribution, you can take a couple of days off and go back in. It's not that way no more. Everybody at the union contribution now, they get in the spot, they don't go to it. Because they know if they leave, they're not going to be able to get it. So I don't think there's any question that we're going to have more shelter space. One of the things about going into a shelter,
That's not a little distraction. That's a full-on.
one of the things about going into a shelter is it's a one-shot deal. If you miss, you're stuck. You're stuck out. If you go to the Union Gospel Mission and you get in that big long line, and then they say, well, we're full, sorry, that's it. You're on the street for the night. You got one shot at it. You better make it a good one. Because if you miss, you're going to be, and the only alternative, if you do miss, is those chairs at the bridge. And if you've ever spent a night in a chair, it is a bummer. Okay? And so, and other than that, you're breaking the law. You're out there unsheltered, and it's against the city ordinance to sleep in public. And so, I don't think there's any question we need more shelter space. Simple fact of the matter is, the population is growing, and the 5 main shelters are still the same as they was 10 years ago. Nothing has changed.
Okay.
So I actually have a couple other things to say.
Okay, is it picked up on the agenda anywhere?
I don't think so.
We got to get into the agenda.
So the first thing is that, to Tanya's point about people calling in to get the 5 speakers, can you make sure, can you call the mayor's office and make sure that at our next meeting that as many people that are experiencing homelessness that want to speak to us are able to? Can you own that part?
I mean, the trade-off is we will have a meeting, we won't be able to actually discuss the additions, but that's the trade-off.
I think
You know,
we set a meeting.
perhaps,
To do that.
what would you guys think about maybe having a separate meeting that we allow, so that way we're able to make sure we make progress on our agenda and give people an opportunity to provide their input that has enough time?
As long as it's convenient for the people who are homeless and not so much convenient for the people who are working.
Well, I'm happy to host it at my site, or there could be another place downtown so that it's convenient, so.
Talked about him hosting an interactive session with this community. He has a community that is regular from a timing standpoint. They queue up at noon, and so we can ask him to address your issues. I think David just sort of said to just convene a meeting. Let's do it.
But this is a public meeting and they have a right to be able to speak, so that's what I'm asking for.
And all the
Speak to that here. We had several community public meetings, and we could not get more than 2 commissioners or 3 commissioners at those meetings. People who sign up to speak and who are homeless or citizens that want to come to these meetings and speak around the people at this table should be allowed to do so. And I think it's incredibly insulting when we say that we want to hear from the homeless and that we want to hear from people, that when they take the time to try to be involved and participate in the conversation, they are told no.
I just defer to the policy of I'm just doing what the city tells me is the thing to do here. So, Brenda, what's the policy?
Well, the chair elects the number of speakers that can speak. You guys got to keep in mind you have 2 hours to actually move policy forward. And so the chair had asked, what's a good number? We do 5 on council days and then move any extra speakers to the end of the day. So that was what I told him. He said 5 sounds great. That's 10 minutes and then we can get on. I'll remind you, we're almost at 1 o'clock and you have not even started an agenda. So I do agree that.
Our goal is to be here to talk about the issues with the homeless, and if the homeless are here to speak, and they should be part of the conversation.
I agree that, Tanya, but at the same time, we do have an agenda and items to get through, so there should be a separate meeting if you want to just listen.
We're bringing up new points.
So,
I understand the importance of sticking to an agenda. I'm a member of the National Association of Parliamentarians, but on the other hand, when you have a commission meeting like this, people should have input into what's discussed. The next item is, you mentioned about having a difficult meeting at City Hall. I also watched it online, and I think it was embarrassing, frankly, for this commission. I think that city council members over and over ask for new ideas, and I think what we have in our draft report is not new ideas. And so I applaud you for saying, hey, let's go look for immediate solutions, but is that it? Is that all we've got? Because I think there are more ideas. I think we've heard people say them, and I don't want to go back to city council again and have those same questions, and I doubt you do.
Yeah, I know. So Bob and I are an idea catcher. So anyone that actually has a thoughtful, detailed set of ideas, we're ready to catch them.
Well, you're saying that you want operational ideas, but then you were criticized for not having operational ideas that you're just now going back to do. So that's not really the situation. I mean, I think we can take big ideas and then make them operational if we all agree on where we're headed.
So let me just respond and then try and get into the process we set up was to review our current environment, which we did, to look at what other cities have put in place, which we tried to do. Bob and I did a lot of it, and we opened it up for the group to provide input. We got a little bit, but not a lot. And then we moved to the strategies and recommendations, which is really the meat of the work. We asked the subcommittees to give us their input. We took it, we've attached it to a draft of about a 60-page report that Bob and I have been working on, best we can, without a lot of staff support or consultant support today. And we have now these general ideas into some very concrete, substantive suggestions. So our city and our county and take those ideas and act on them if they think it's the right thing to do. And so I'm just encouraging us as a group to move out of the general and move into the more focused with the understanding that it's open, we're open for whatever ideas people have. I saw the alternative plan. I think that's awesome. A lot of those same ideas are ideas that are kind of baked into some of these other
Okay, well, so speaking of that, there's a number of people here who have already spoken about the structural issue of this commission, and I'm going to speak to that as well. I think that I would actually like to make a formal motion that any person on the commission with a financial conflict of interest in this draft report, meaning anyone who is a staff member or serves as a board of directors of a nonprofit that stands to receive funding from this report or our proposal to the council be excluded from voting on the commission report contents.
Now, let me respond to that motion.
Well, I think it has to be seconded before you can.
Well, okay, so now it's been seconded. Let me speak to it. I've sat in all of these meetings, and occasionally someone attacks the I don't know, the motives of some people on the commission. I'm here, and one of the things I was going to say to get us moving on the agenda a little bit is if we want to have short-term impact without spending a lot of dollars, one of the things that I was encouraged by that is on the agenda, so Britton, I'm going to get us into the agenda a little bit, is this whole idea of housing navigation. My organization that doesn't pay me a nickel, and I give them plenty of money, and we're willing to spend money, not asking for money. But one of the things that I was encouraged about is this apartment navigation idea. I've heard some good ideas, or maybe good ideas, about what we might be able to do at Parkland or what we might be able to do at the jail, and I'm all for looking into those. My organization has we've only been able to use about 60 to 65% of the resources, the budgeted resources that we want to spend to help house people. The reason why we're not able to spend that other 35 to 40% is we can't find the housing. That point out of this plan is one thing I was very encouraged by. I didn't attend the council meeting, but I watched it online. The mayor made a very insightful comment about the light bulb moment for him was realizing that there are quite a few nonprofits in the city. Cindy and Dallas Housing, Metro Dallas Housing Alliance is kind of the coordination point for a lot of those organizations, nonprofits that work with homeless people. She knows as well as anyone, and probably knows the other organizations like mine, who are having trouble finding the housing to put the people in, to spend the dollars that we've raised to be able to do that. That's one thing I was encouraged by. I think to eviscerate this commission, you take all of the nonprofits out of here who are trying to work on it. And, you know, I have concerns if there's somebody who's out there trying to develop housing and get money for housing and stuff. I'm a little concerned about their motives, whether they have a dollar motive. But if there's a nonprofit sitting around this table who spent years working on the homeless problem, not looking for a handout, looking to try and help solve the problem, I think you go in the wrong direction if you want to challenge those people's motives. I'm offended by it. And
I would agree with my neighbor. I think it's absolutely absurd to suggest that because there is a financial interest, it disqualifies somebody from the conversation. None of the city council members could vote on a single thing that comes up.
Gary sitting next to you, I was very passionate, and I appreciate the way it came across. But how many people at this table are on someone's payroll today? I'm not. And I can assure you there's other people that aren't on someone's payroll today. Okay, so if you're here on someone's payroll, the money is the issue. So to me, I couldn't disagree with you more, Bill, because money is the root of the problem. Yes. It's what we're seeking, it's what we're going after, it's what we're wasting, it's what we're not, we're sitting here, his ideas are great. Well, everyone wants to go for the money, but no one, I saw some financial numbers in here, I'll be honest with you, they look out of context to me. So.
When we get to the budget, I would agree with you.
Involved, you're going to make a decision that benefits yourself. It's just natural instinct, it's the way it is. The man sitting next to you doesn't get paid, he isn't doing anything. Obviously, there's not a thing on this board that's going to change his mind. But if there's someone sitting to the left of you who's trying to pull funds into their organization, I can guarantee you that they're going to push for a certain thing.
Can I make one thing absolutely clear? We have no authority to allocate $1. We have no authority to allocate $1. It's other people that have that authority. And so, Jim, the idea that we're going to make decisions how money gets allocated.
Not allocated,
that's right. But I'm just saying, and so let's hear from others. I'm going to exercise a little bit of authority chair and move us into the agenda so we don't waste.
There's a motion on the table.
Waste.
Point of order, there is no agenda for action items today. There's no discussion topic for this issue, and this is a public body, and we cannot vote on that today. I'm sure, I don't know if we have an attorney assigned, but it's not agended, it's not listed as an action item, this isn't posted. It would have to be for a future meeting.
And if I could just note, we also have an ethics policy for the city of Dallas, so we should be following that policy. So I don't think we can have a hyper standard that goes above and beyond that. So I would encourage the chair to make that policy available to everybody so that we can know what our policy is. If there are very clear conflicts of interest standards for boards and commissions.
Well, and this does not currently qualify as a city commission, so we are not bound by those rules. Should the commission be restructured in the future, we would be bound by any of those rules.
So I didn't intend to cast any votes here. We've never voted.
I think we voted on the housing first issue.
So anyway, let's get, if it's okay, let's go ahead and talk about the substantive issues. And, we're going to get to a point where everyone can vote on whatever anyone wants to vote on. But
You asked to open up to the floor for feedback based off the last city council meeting, and people are voicing and sharing their frustrations, and they, I think, have a right to do that. You look at where we've come from. When we started this process, I look at prior to the city council meeting, and I sat around the table, and I looked at the people around the table and the relationships that had been formed, the conversations that were taking place, how far we had come, how optimistic I felt about our future, about being able to address the homeless challenges that we're all right here for. And now I flash forward to today, after city council, and I am frustrated, I'm disappointed. As far as a nonprofit or an individual or group that might have a conflict, we need to rely on those groups for their expertise. To say that they are not part of the commission or not part of the conversation, I think we're trying to draw a line in the sand that just isn't there. You look at the Parks Board, you look at the Animal Board, you look at other sanctioned boards and commissions within the city that do have very, very strict conflict of interest. And I think if this board was reorganized in that fashion, you would see things very, very differently. We would have the opportunity to hear from these nonprofits and these groups as the experts. They could share their recommendations, and then you would have individuals that represent the taxpayers and the voters that could then convene and make a decision going forward. I think, Mr. Chair, at this point, to try to print deadlines and print dates is not a realistic, it's just not a realistic thing that we can do. I think that we need to re-strategize and look at how we need to either be restructured, how our conversation needs to change, and not focus on November as being some deadline, but how we can restructure going forward.
Can I just level set, and then we'll try. Obviously, we have structural challenges. It's plain, apparent. As Mr. King suggested, we have hundreds, maybe thousands of homeless people in our community. So for us to debate process and structural challenges.
That's exactly why we need to realize this isn't working. There's too much at risk.
One thing, I think that, number one, let me suggest, Mr. Chair, that we try to look at scheduling more meetings. Because obviously we need more time to discuss these issues, and we're going to have difficulty getting the actual agenda and getting range, as you suggest. The other thing I would suggest in consideration of involvement is that I find that whether you're representing a nonprofit or you're not, there are many different motivations that we can see as to why people choose to do what they do. So the conversation about who should be involved, I think, will become much more complex than some people are considering. I think right now, if we can simply focus on what ideas do we have, what real solutions do we have to deal with this crisis? The actual plans and whether they work or not, and make comments and considerations relative to taking action. That would be
I'm going to call on
that point, and then we can determine whether the organizational structure is sufficient to make decisions based upon the action.
So with that, I'm going to call on Ms. Mitchell. I'm going to skip over bullet one and bullet one. I'm going to go right to outreach and housing navigation. That was our number one. There were 3 subcommittees that recommended that we unpack that as a short-term solution, which we did, and we put it in front of the city council. It's moving. I think we should learn about it. We should try and understand if it's working or not. Ms. Mitchell.
So unfortunately, because of our feedback issues, I'm going to try to play through this more on an informational basis than anything else, because I think it's important to know that we are concerned about the encampments. We are working on those encampments, but also we are concerned about the residents that surround the encampments, your permanent folks, your folks that have businesses like Jim, folks that live around the encampments. And so I think it's also important to discuss how the city itself, our money, our normal resources will address cleanups. And so I'll get into that. So first of all, I don't think most people know that if you have a concern, you see a homeless person, you're concerned about panhandling, you see trash somewhere, that it's important to call 311 and report it. That is the call center that we will be using in order to map a dashboard of where all these locations are coming up. That is what we will use as a dashboard. Understand that that's our best method, and then from there we utilize, and we'll map it out, maybe we can see it. We'll be mapping this out regularly. I have a spreadsheet of all the calls. I have them by council district, so if anybody wishes to see what that looks like, and in fact the council members did ask for a district listing, and so we provided that. And again, at any given time, 311 can provide the list and a map at any time. So feel free to email me if you want a copy of that. The next step that happens is that so 911 is reporting crime. Okay, so that's when you're going to have a police officer go out.
There's also danger, so like I've called 911 3 times in the past 3 weeks about someone homeless walking on the highway.
Yeah, so realize that what we're going to try to do as a city is we're going to try to intervene. We're going to try to go out, address your issue, address what you've reported in. So the police department, crisis intervention, Dave, are you here? Stand up, please. Dave Hogan is our lead within the crisis intervention team. They are a triage team, so they're out of the police department. They go out, they're checking on the situation, okay? They're gonna report back whether, is this a trash issue? Is this a situational encampment? Given that we have a panhandler that might have been sleeping there during the day, but they're gone wherever at night. They're not actually sleeping at night there. Or is it a permanent encampment? And then they're gonna write a report on how many people are there, are they sleeping there, what's the situation? And that's how we will further document and engage other departments. So if there is a permanent encampment, they're going to attempt to outreach to the homeless people that are there. They will make referrals. If those people want to go to shelter, they can transport them to the shelter, and then they provide the handoff to even mental health or substance abuse treatment. So they actually take them there, okay? They have been primarily involved in the notices of closure, the notices to vacate when an encampment is cleared. So we are utilizing them as well as police officers in proper to stage our encampment closures. That's different from street outreach, and that's different from caseworker, case management, okay? And so they're helping us reach all those dashboard points. Now, when we talk about cleanup, and I know this has been a little bit of confusion for a lot of folks, the streets department of the city of Dallas, which will now fold into a bigger Department of Transportation, is in charge of TxDOT right-of-way. So if the property is TxDOT property, TxDOT has contracted with the city of Dallas to mow and pick up litter on those sites. With the additional encampment concepts and what's coming about with that, they're hiring a contractor called Good Earth that has a hazmat team that goes out to clean up the locations, okay? And so that's all TxDOT property. And that's at our cost. That's regular city budgets. That's not additional to anybody. But there are other departments that also deal with trash and litter, and that's important to note. So private property, you see a lot of trash, it's called illegal dumping. You call codes. You can also call 311 if you want and just say there's illegal dumping. Go pick it up. If you're walking along the trail of the Trinity and you see trash, the Trinity River group picks up trash regularly as reported along the Trinity and the trails. Parks, if you're in a park and you see trash, Parks picks up that trash. Sanitation, you guys know the regular dumpsters, they typically are serving residential, commercial residents and paying customers, but they will help us if we need to place a trash can somewhere before an encampment closure. And I think that covers, any questions on that? Yes, Michael.
The difference between a permanent camp and a situational camp, what is the difference on the camp? Because just this week, 5 camps have sprung up in Cedars area. And they're not permanent camps, they're not big camps, but neither was the city when it first started. So when does it hit the line and crisis intervention comes and cleans that up?
Crisis.
You want to keep it from getting big.
Yeah, so crisis will come whenever you call. So you're going to call 311, they're going to come out and check it out. They're going to call streets if that's appropriate, or they're going to call codes if it's on a private property.
Now, when it's on private property, and I was through my phone, we did probably 200 311 calls this week. And 45% of them came back saying that they cannot identify the situation. Even there's a picture of the geocode. One of them was an encampment. They said they couldn't identify it. Then they cited the property owner for garbage.
Yep.
So the property owner, even though she doesn't live there and keeps it mowed, now has a fine because people can't dump their things. So what can the citizens do or the police do to get that off of private property? Because all 5 are on private property.
Yeah, so again, that's the private property owner has to be responsible for that at this point. Otherwise, yeah, they're going to get a citation from codes. It's your property. You can place trespassing signs on your property as well. And crisis can also help you how those look typically. No, not on private property. You place no trespassing signs.
No trespassing signs,
And then a and then a police officer can actually come to the site if you're reporting something, and they can address those folks that are on that property.
Now, have the police been versed in this? Again, we went through the whole process of calling the police. The officer, the 911 operator didn't know what a criminal trespass affidavit was. We had to explain that to her, and that's every time. The officer who called me back wanted, and it wasn't my property, it was a neighbor's. The policeman told me to contact DPI to find out where the property line was. Because the homeless people said that it was city property. And again, the guy was at work, he wasn't around, so obviously the people who were living there did not own it, but it's been a week and they're still there. And it's this unending frustration of having to explain every single time. I think some education process for the officers that are on the street needs to be done.
Duly noted.
Is that a situation where it should be crisis intervention going out there, they're identifying people on private property?
Yeah, they were camping on private property, engaged in an illicit act in broad daylight, which is why I called 911.
So should that, if they see people camping, should they be calling 311 to try to identify?
I think the response is appropriate. Illicit activity or criminal activity that can be reported through 911. If it's, I see some trash or I see somebody and you don't think it's criminal, then you report it into 311. But that's at your discretion.
And follow on that, 311, the average citizen can call 311. 311 will direct it to the proper department.
Yes.
For the streets.
Yes.
I interject, when I had conversation. My perspective is we need to keep our city clean, and the city should have a high bar responsibility of keeping our neighborhoods and our cities clean. And I'm fine as one person saying that. the premise under which I was operating was that was a given. But if it's not a given and we want to make a statement relative to it as a body, I'm not opposed to that. Just so you know.
The ongoing conversations that we do have with the community is the quality of life issues, the mess, the garbage, the public urinations. And if we took care of that, that's an easy, low-hanging fruit because there's already ordinances that govern this stuff. There's police, there's code. If we focused on that, and then we need to ask the community for support for something later on, that would make it that much easier. Because right now, if you ask the citizens for some money for a program, they're going to say, look at this. Every sewer in the neighborhood is clogged with styrofoam, and you want us to give you more money to encourage more of this. So I think that's a low-hanging fruit thing that we should be able to show that the commission is actually doing something, we have a positive result.
Would it be helpful if we ask the city to report back at our next meeting, action plan relative to what you just said?
That would be great.
So back to my 911 311 question, he called 911, so it would not be included in your report, is that right?
We have been pulling 911 calls to document health and safety concerns in certain locations, particularly where there's encampments. And so we will pull in that data, but that's not the immediate dashboard for encampment locations. Okay.
I'm going to circulate, by the way, her PowerPoint.
I was just going to mention, we actually have the serving deputy chief, it's Major Anderson, he stepped in. He was responsible for all of Central Business District and the area that Michael is referring to. I don't know if you want to provide any input or maybe make a few comments.
Yes, absolutely. So the area that Mike was responding to is the Cedars. It's an area that has been aggressively panhandled, a lot of quality of life violations. Just here in the last 6 months, we created a peak team to address some of those issues and just some of the same issues that he's talking about: urinating in public, sleeping in public, defecating in public, sitting on private property. And those guys primarily work the evening, going into the late night hours. As you know, we don't have enough officers, so we're always looking for additional resources. But I can tell you that from a central control standpoint, we are committed to addressing those issues and definitely look forward working to the citizens to further submit solutions towards them.
Coming up with whatever the city policy is and being able to share that with the group in our next meeting, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, could I respectfully request that maybe we set up a separate group to address community quality of life issues, because I for one don't think that's the primary charge of this commission. I think we're here to address homelessness, not the effects that homelessness has on the community. There's already laws and procedures in place, whether they're being utilized or not. That's a separate matter. But we have spent a lot of time here talking about issues which affect the community, which I really feel as strongly that need to be addressed. But we've spent almost no time actually talking about getting people in houses, which I think is the biggest responsibility that we have as a commission.
It was just, honestly, it was just to try to put that to bed. People are sitting here haggling over when to call 911, when to call 311. You call 911 when there's a breach of peace, something's unsafe, somebody's in trouble. You don't call 311 when they're pissing you off. It's easy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me then get to, if I can move us along then, I did want to put that to bed because there are a lot of concerns about trash and litter and cleanup and who's responsible. And again, we're trying to provide a very streamlined approach that if you have a concern in your neighborhood, you can report it and you have a method to do that. Let's talk about encampments. So the subcommittee that worked on encampments and street outreach had a suggested plan. I think you guys saw that draft at the last meeting. And so we presented that to the Housing Committee. Nothing specific changed with it other than understand that we're going to be documenting true health and safety concerns. Obviously, legally, it's not illegal to be homeless. And so we're going to be looking at how do we document those true health and safety concerns so that we don't criminalize our folks, but that we do think thoughtfully about how to get them in shelters and how to get them help. And so just to kind of recap real fast, the I-30, I-45 encampment closure had a high point of 300 people, had about 5 sections. The actual time frame for the closure was 45 days, and that included actually from February, although we closed in May, the street outreach teams were out there since February, identifying people, getting information about them. I think one of you gentlemen mentioned that. Getting them in a database so that we could see, okay, where can we place them? Intensive case management. So those that were on the ground every day talking to those folks. We identified resources. We communicated with each other about where we were going to place signs, for example, our timing of notices for closure and for trespassing, and then for the final date of closure, so that it hit on a day where we knew a lot of the folks would be getting their disability checks or be getting their money the first of the month, so that they could, and it would incentivize them to move along at that point in time. And then closing systematically the sections with careful police patrol, with careful barricades and things like that, and then fencing that area. Understanding, though, that in the future, every encampment's different, and we may not be able to fence everything. And I say that funny because some of these areas actually have now been talked about to bring about different kind of uses, like an urban park or something like that. The outreach workers and volunteers assisted with moving the people, helping them move their items, helping them pack the items. There were no arrests, and so that was the May closure. The Coombs closure was different. The Coombs closure, although we knew that some of the folks came out of the original encampment at I-45 and I-30 to go to Coombs, it was a more delicate population, much needier, much more behavioral health concerns, and so it literally was a health and safety concern for the reason that we closed. There had already been at least 2 deaths at the location, I think 1 stabbing, and so those kind of things really trigger us to move a little faster. And so there wasn't as much case management because there just wasn't the lead time to get there and the resources to do it. It has been closed and fenced. TxDOT has a lot of zip ties and equipment kind of stuff there as well. So some of the accomplishments, and I think that that's really important to think about from May, June timeframe to now. There have been 57 people housed by City Square. 4 people separately, 4 people moved outside of Dallas, decided to go rejoin family or otherwise. 13 people ended up in emergency shelter. 2 people were housed by MetroCare. 2 persons went to private permanent supportive housing, and 18 were fully assessed and then put on a priority list to be housed as we get more units available or shelter space available. And so the tracking, we are currently tracking Harwood and Haskell encampments and noting any health and safety concerns. The trash did build up at Harwood, so we did send a hazmat team to clean that up recently. So we will continue to monitor those kind of situations. The Haskell encampment, I believe at the last week's count was around 84. Is that right? About 84, 82 last week. So it's come down a bit because the population at Haskell's a little different. If I could use a word that I guess I made up, they're more housable, if that makes sense.
What's the status of the one on Northwest Highway?
So again, we have a dashboard of, God, if I'm going to characterize, I'm going to say about 80 encampments across the city. And so we're monitoring each one. There's Medical City is a different one, and I mean, they're all over the city, so, you know, it just varies in degree of how many people are there.
Well, I was going to ask, how are you, I know you've given intensive engagement to the larger ones. Are you able to interact with and engage as much the 78 other encampments across the city?
Well, so again, what we're doing is documenting those situations. So who's there, who are they, what do they need, why are they not in shelter, why, and getting all those answers. We're going to be monitoring health and safety concerns. That's our first and foremost.
Maybe that's a good segue. So the idea that we unpacked was we would do outreach at scale, and we would try and find apartments at scale. And so I think it's important in the interest of time to talk about what you see relative to that going forward.
So, yeah, I think most folks are in agreement that in order to even get to these folks, to identify them, you've got to have an outreach team that really spends a lot more time than DPD is able to spend at any one location or two locations. And so once you get those on the radar with the dashboard, you move them over to a street outreach team that can then meet regularly, and they are meeting every other week to go by name lists and say, do you have Mr. Jones? Okay, I have Mr. Brown. Okay, who has what? And that team currently is staffed out of several different agencies, including some mental and behavioral health groups. The county, the city, City Square, MetroCare. If I'm missing somebody, I'm sorry. I know even Turtle Creek's been out there. And so that team is able to know who's out where. Where are you going? If we close this encampment, where do they go? So we're tracking them as well. The next step, though, is getting them into bed space, shelter bed space, and/or housing units. We've had veterans that already have vouchers that are living under the bridge, that all we got to do is find them a unit. And so everybody's situation is going to be different. So it's not exactly cookie cutter, but we kind of know that we need street outreach and we need somebody to find space, whatever that space is.
What's the level of access to that? Once the outreach is done, you've identified people in their situations and conditions, is that something that can be accessed as a reportable data?
Absolutely. Am I on? It sounds like nobody's on.
Because of Black ID, in situations that are obviously there, is there any type of small laminated identification card that we can get a picture and get it in a database? Because I think that's something that we discussed since the beginning of this committee, is to somehow identify, because we don't have a license, we don't have a social security card, we don't have these certain things, we have a name, we have a face, and we can put any number you want to put to it that you choose. By writing that into a small database, putting it in a cloud situation where everyone can access it, I think all the different outreach programs, all the different homeless shelters, all the different shelters, how we want to categorize it, we use the joint cloud and pull out. And even if the name's not accurate with what the real name is, we know that person, that would help expedite.
That's such a great idea. It exists. So we do. We have substantial. And since we have put a lot of an increased effort into street outreach, you have in front of you, I've heard several times people say we don't know anything about people on the street. And our active database that's only about 6 months old has 383 people, of which we know a great deal of data about. And what I've handed you is some of the basic, what happens on those first contacts with street outreach. And we try to maintain about a 1 case manager to 10 household ratio, because once you make that intensive contact, you got to work the housing plan. You've got one of the individuals probably has a variety of things they need, and we try to immediately assess, and the lowest hanging fruit. You'll look on the housing barrier. That's the most important thing. They're under a bridge because they don't have housing, and so we work through that. The information and the data is in the system. We track it. We look when they exit from streets, where they go from there. There's an extensive amount of accountability and documentation and performance metrics that we have to comply to with the federal regs, and it's the Homeless Management Information System. So every day we're out there, we know more and more, and we get better at what we do to identify whatever the path is.
So Kelly, you've done some system mapping?
Yeah, and I have where'd she go?
Brenda.
So I have slides, but she was supposed to be passing them out, so obviously it's not working. So if we could get Brenda to pass out.
Brenda.
Go ahead.
It's hard to follow without having it right in front of you, but what we did is, I'm Kelly Opat with CSH, and I'm based in Houston. But what we've decided to do to help out some of this effort is to do a tool that CSH has called a system map that looks at
I was on this one.
where
Outreach
people
and
are
navigation.
coming from, where they're going in our homelessness system here in Dallas, and then where they're exiting to. And we use that, we track all of that information through the homeless management information system. Now, the data that we have shows that there's about 3,000 people going into emergency shelter, but the only data that we have on the exits are, it's about 65% of those people are being exited. The other thing that we know is that only about 18% of our shelter beds are in HMIS. And so we used that information to extrapolate some projections around our data, our housing needs, based on what we have in HMIS and what we know from our system. And so about 82% of the folks that are entering into emergency shelter are exiting back into homelessness or somewhere where we don't know. And, you know, part of the challenge with analyzing data is the data that we can analyze is only as good as the data that we have. But I don't think that we should let that cripple ourselves here. It does give us a good picture of the data that we do have and the organizations that are participating. So it gives us a good picture of where people are coming from, where people are going, and how many people are exiting to permanent housing. So all of that information comes from our HMIS, but our point in time count that's done every year, and our housing inventory chart that's reported to HUD annually, and that reports to HUD what our housing mix is for transitional housing, emergency shelter, permanent housing, and rapid rehousing. So we use all of that data to create this map, and I'll let you digest it a little bit. It's fairly dense, but as you're looking at it, you know, there's emergency shelter and safe haven are on the top. Transitional housing is on the bottom, so it's where people are coming from entering into those things. And then the gray boxes to the right are exits to homelessness. The green boxes to the right are exits to permanent housing. So I'll let you look at what it's telling us about once people are going into emergency shelter, where they're going. Yes, ma'am.
So I know you were just looking at the data, but you guys work with communities across our country.
Yep.
I'm interested, where would you say are our three greatest vulnerabilities within Dallas, but and our three greatest opportunities as you analyze this data?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it, one of the big vulnerabilities that I see when I look at this is that there is a lot of information missing. So we don't actually know where people are going. So we're relying on a lot of anecdotal information to make decisions, which really, we can't make really solid decisions as a community if we're only relying on anecdotal data. So, you know, to really be able to drive our system, to use a reliable system to track where people are going and how people are running through our system, so we know a little bit more about where they are and what they need. That was one of the big things. I mean, another big thing that I noticed, and my colleagues when we looked at this is, and it's not super uncommon, but there are a lot of people coming from emergency shelter to emergency shelter. So, you know, what's the opportunity there? We need to think about what is the goal of shelter. I've heard a lot of conversation about having more emergency shelter. So is our goal to just keep people circling around emergency shelter, or are we trying to get people out of emergency shelter into housing? I think that's part of the conversation that we need to continue to have. You know, just how do we get it to function a little bit more appropriately, and how do we make sure that the beds that are there are being utilized to their best?
You mentioned that 18% are in the HMIS system.
Yep.
How do we get that?
Yes.
How do we do a better job?
It's the $1 million question, right? You know, there are a variety of ways. Most communities do it through funding. So it's coordinating funding across philanthropic dollars, public dollars, dollars that go into funding these shelters.
And I'll just say it was a primary recommendation that we did our data app together. That's something that we shared with the city council. The federal government allocated, because we asked them to, almost $400,000 to enable us to do it. It's going online next month. And so I think a year from now we'll be in a much better place on the data, and we'll get the individual information for each of our member of our homeless population. So,
what I'm saying is with that $400,000, what does it cost? We had an identification study. If they went to the bridge this way, but then if they went to somewhere else this way, then
Yes.
if the police can, I can show them kind of a better feel, because that's tracking, because it sounds to me like we're just tracking numbers. And we don't know if that person came in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, and it was the same person.
We actually, we track people, we just don't give you the names. It's all privacy. So when I present data, I aggregate it out.
what happens is, this is a really great system, and we just kind of get it going. So the hospitals are going to be on the system. The shelters are going to be on the system, or many of them will be. We'll have folks that have mental illness services will be on the system. So as the homeless individual goes from institution to institution, he's in a database. Obviously, well, I mean, I don't know about that, but if he presents his name, there's confidentiality issues that.
Sure. I don't need the number, but you need the number to track it.
Yeah.
There's never recommending we get CCCI to come present so that people understand what the database looks like.
We were going to actually take time to do that today, but we don't have the time to do it today.
Britton, what happened to the navigation conversation about the apartments, getting people in?
So if we can then route back to Bernadette and talk about what the plan is to get people off the streets into shelter, and off the streets into shelter or housing, and how we're going to get the apartment.
Well, can I just, since they have two documents, just so you understand what this is in front of you.
Okay.
Because I did, I went over the system map, which really is more interesting, is this, the permanent housing gap analysis that we did. And so it takes a lot of this information and extrapolates it, looks at annualized numbers, makes predictions, and uses national data and local data to tell us what our gap is in permanent housing. And so if you look, the very first slide, that we'll need about 950 new units annually of permanent supportive housing to be able to end homelessness. So that's all of this information is outlined in here, and I'm happy, it's pretty dense.
950 additional units per year.
Additional units, I'm sorry, not per year.
Additional units.
Yes, additional units, not per year, sorry.
Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Now, this is based off the annualization of the point in time count?
A combination of the point in time count and the annual homeless assessment report, AR. Put in a little cheat sheet with that.
So you have data that I encourage everyone to, read and dig into it. And now back to you, Bernie. So how are we going to get the outreach going in the apartment application?
Yeah, so I want to keep this on a business side from Jim's side, because I think it's real important to know that the data the need for data and the need for everybody to put in the data will help us maneuver the population. So if we see that the bridge has 5 beds that night, then we move people over there. If we see that UGM or Dallas Life have a few beds, then we're able to quickly respond and move folks over there. The accuracy of the data cannot be understated, because that will help us maneuver this system. Not just that. Then when we move into the permanent housing, or somebody's stabilized enough to move into a unit, an apartment, then we need to get to the navigation side. So how do we get to asset mapping all of our available units, that at any given time a caseworker says, okay, you got your voucher, we're ready to put you over here. And that each individual caseworker right now is having to find those units. How inefficient is that, right? So what we'd like to do is get just a common group that's meeting regularly, that has either master leases with apartment owners, or apartment owners that have just come to the table that says, hey, I have 1 unit I'm willing to give, and get all those assets mapped on the table, along with putting those in the database, because then that'll help us maneuver the folks again. And so to that extent, what we anticipate that means is that you'll need some money for master leasing. You may need risk fees for owners that are a little reluctant, like, okay, I'll let you house this person, but You know, I may want to charge an extra piece of security deposit or something and have that pool, so move-in deposits for utilities. I mean, any of that kind of stuff can come out of this pool. And so right off the bat, you see like 3 tiers. So you got the street outreach, you got folks that are ready, okay, let's move you to the shelter, let's move, you know, you've already got a voucher, let's go ahead and move you into a unit, and then you have housing navigation. Those may or may not be new positions, because I kind of feel like as we get the data ready, as we get this source ready, we'll be able to react to that with a lot of existing people. It may be just retooling our systems and then having this sort of master deposit fund, if you will.
So the short-term strategy that we shared was basically what Bernadette is suggesting we implement. And our goal is to house 600 of our homeless population in 1 year. Either get them in the shelter, hostages in the shelters, or in the permanent. So that's kind of where we are on that. Other questions for Bernadette?
Do you know how many people that are in the 80 encampments have a voucher?
Maybe 3. That's low-hanging fruit. We cleared that out.
So I'm just going
Months
to tell
ago.
you that if I was Dallas City Council and you gave me these recommendations, I would not be happy. I would be wanting to know, wow, you've got 80 encampments. When you started the commission, there were 40, and there's not a lot on here that's addressing immediate solutions to get people out of encampments. I mean, a lot of HMIS, and I get the passion for it and the need for it, and it's important, but like today, what are you doing to lower that number from 80? And I don't think it's there. And second, I don't see where we're talking about families, and I'm going to tell you that every meeting I go to, I talk about families, and having a drop-in center to keep our homeless youth homeless is not an answer, and I don't think that we are doing nearly enough. I would not like this report at all.
The short term, I think that
We anticipate that there will be majority participation from the different relevant organizations in putting that data in. So we know all of the shelters are participating, we know all the relevant beds that are available, et cetera.
So I can answer that. So the agencies that receive federal funding will be required to, or they won't be able to receive the federal funding. That's basically the HUD requirement. For agencies that don't receive federal funding, it's kind of a voluntary proposition. Best I can tell, several, including Daniel Austin Street Center, is voluntary, but he's indicated a strong interest in doing it. And the system will be great if we get everyone participating.
Can I just join in on that? So we had confirmation at the city council meeting that the city, and they Bernie can confirm that all the contracts, any city funding now requires HMIS participation, regardless of whether there's HUD. So, you know, we're moving closer, and after this meeting, you're going to see a copy of the presentation that I prepared in July that have yet to present. but I want to take the portion of her response and let's eliminate the housing component of it. I want to go on the HMIS and the concept of the card and all that. I think we have to recognize this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to get everybody on the same page on the information we collect. And if we limit it to just that which is required for HUD funding, we're going to miss the opportunity to track and find where the intelligent, informed investment is. So I think we as a group, we as shelters, agencies, we as funders, public, private, we need I call it a vice grip, and you'll see that. I mean, we've got to put everybody within that vice grip because we need to compress our resources. That means we've got to collaborate. We have to communicate. It's one thing to be in a room and say, yeah, we're in favor of the homelessness, but if we're not sharing the information to find the right place for that individual at that moment in time, we're going to waste lots of money and time, and we're going to go from 80 to 100, 120 shelters. So a couple of things on the HMIS. Initially, there was an idea that we would have a standing start, and we would wait to have everybody adopt and migrate and have 3 years of information. And we have to fight that. We need a running start. So what we got to do is get started with somebody, and there are 1 or 2 shelters that are ready today. 1 or 2. One of those shelters has 3 years of history, but we can't wait for everybody. So we got to get started, and we need to support everyone within the sphere beyond just the top 15 or 20 shelters. They don't have any funding for execution. They've got funding for implementation. They'll get maybe they'll get a CD in the mail or something, and they can stick it in their IBM PC XT, in the Bernoulli box. But we're going to need to meet some more funding to make sure we get that broad picture. We won't be able to answer the question about where is Mr. Jones, who was over here before, and I'm worried about his condition. So we have to look laterally in this group, not just across the room, and say we've got to get together on information gathering. The other thing we have to do is talk to funders. And I've had a lot of those conversations with private funders, communities, foundations, as well as individuals, and say, as much as you think funding this singular initiative without any hooks or any responsibilities is consistent with your own belief system, it's actually detrimental to the big picture. Because what you'll see in the materials I sent out is we're going to be graded by HUD on a system basis, not as how well this agency or that shelter does or this constituency. They're not going to say, oh, wow, it's fixed because you dealt with veterans, for example. And so we're going to have to ask some funders to require the recipients of their funding to participate in HMIS. That's a big change. If we do that tomorrow, we'll be a lot better than we are today. So we're going to send this out after the meeting. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to respond to it. But we got to get going. And get going doesn't mean perfect. Perfect is the enemy of good or better, and we got to get better. So.
With the presentation, we talked about the HMIS system and then kind of moving that to the street outreach and all that stuff, and then kind of the last piece being the street outreach. I very much would suggest that the street outreach, the apartment navigation piece needs to be fast-tracked. There are organizations out there right now, I represent one, who have some resources, who have already, we've been able to identify people. We're now being kind of tracked where everybody's got to come through the HMIS, and we'll do that because we're one of those organizations that got that funding. We've identified the people, we've got some resources. Finding the housing that's in the affordable range that we can deal with, that's a critical need. And I think that piece of it really needs to kind of be accelerated and not viewed as a third piece in a 3-step process. It really needs, I mean, if that could have been done 6 months ago or 10 months ago, that would help. And each organization of the dozen or 18, I don't know how many, you probably know better than I do, the numbers of continuing care, how many they are. Each organization, it's very inefficient for each organization itself to go out and try and beat the bushes and find the housing. If we have a more coordinated effort to do that, to contact the landlords, give them a central point they can contact, I think that could go a long way. But there's some resources out there. We're not all just looking for a handout, asking for money. We need some help. We need some help identifying where the housing resources. The problem we've got now is fundamentally, there's a lot of ideas about how we deal with it. Fundamentally, it's a lack of housing that we can put people in that is affordable within the resources we've got. And we're fortunately in an area, it's economic boom, housing, rents are going through the roof, and we need to get the navigation.
So pitch it to because I mean, I share that without being able to identify 600, 800,000 units within the existing inventory, because we don't have the ability to develop in a timely way the new stock we need. We're going to be continually frustrated. So let's talk a little bit about the conversation that's going on inside the Real Estate Council and the Apartment Association.
So we've been meeting, we've had 2 meetings so far with the Apartment Association and other managers of multifamily that operate in this market. And they're very willing to come up with a system of providing an inventory of housing that would be suitable and voucher pricing available. So, the question they asked us the last time, the first one we met was, if we have units, who do we contact? Well, that's the big issue. So they need to have a central place. They're not going to go to organization by organization. So as soon as we can develop a system where there is a single point of contact, that system will be a lot more streamlined, and they're working on that now. Britton talked with the email communication with the head of the Department of Education at the end of last week, and we're going to be meeting in the next, I think next week or the week after next, to talk through exactly what is needed to be able to get people in. What's the subsidy required? Is there, a master lease scenario that we'd be talking about? What does that cost? What's it going to take for deposits? All that kind of thing. And frankly, they're very, very interested in the problem. Understanding that in a market where it's 92 to 94% occupancy, which is technically 100% occupancy, it's identifying units, but they are willing to utilize all of their members and try to build up that pipeline of immediately available housing. So that is in process, and we've got concrete steps when we meet the next time, and we can have perspective.
Hey, Linda, the response community got together with a really simple solution to try to communicate. We just have a Google Doc that is accessed by anyone, and we go real time, and if you have an empty bed, we put it on there, then anyone can access that Google Doc. Maybe they could start there with just what the name of the apartment complex is, where it is, how many bedrooms they have, deposit, just some simple, like 5 or 6 columns, and just access that. If they would commit to keeping it up real time, that's the other issue, but at least then we can pop on there and see, I can send this person over here and have a better chance of getting,
Do you have that already?
Uh-huh.
Can you send a link to that so that I can just really share that with them and see if that works? I think it's going to have, the real-time issue is going to be the issue because it will require someone keeping it up continuously. I don't know whether the apartment association has the staff to be able to do it.
But it's up to the individual apartment complex. So we access it as a shelter. The hotline worker gets on there and says, just freed up a bed. And so everyone's email has to have permission, you give permissions to it, and then it's low tech.
More low tech.
I like the way that the navigation piece is moving, and I think that's very good what you're talking about. What about the wraparound services piece of that?
That's a great question. So Ron is here, and we actually have had great conversations with a nonprofit foundation in the community that's going to make a major investment in the wraparound services. So the overall idea was to grow full resources to $9 million to commit a third of those dollars to mental illness, to substance abuse, to all of the needs. And so we're trying to find out that in the conversations with Ron and the county, the county is kind of owning that, which is amazing for the county to do. The city, I'm hoping.
System for funding public mental health services. Consumers and another for with Medicaid. It's a massive undertaking. It has to happen effective January 1st. But it does give us some new opportunities for more local control over how we spend our dollars and more of a focus on priority populations, which certainly include the homeless. The second thing we have going, have been around for a little while, is the 1115 Medicaid waiver. Many of the hospitals got funding for that, and the county has a project. We're in the last year of that. The extension is still very questionable. We don't know how things are going to happen. And then the third thing is our Caruth Smart Justice Project that we have partnered with Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute and others for a very extensive survey of our system. And the goal of this is to improve the way we screen and identify and assess folks with mental illness so we can keep them out of the justice system. So what very concretely will come out of that, this year, Dallas County's spending about $3.5 million of their own money on services that support housing. And this goes, it's $1 million to the bridge and about $2.5 million out of our waiver dollars. And out of that, we do funding to the Salvation Army for transitional beds. MetroCare does an ACT team for us around forensics, and we'll talk at another time about ACT team. Assertive community treatment is that real intensive wraparound in the model we want to follow. And then about $2 million for general support services out in the community. This year coming in, we'll have about $6.5 million in Dallas County funds, leveraging about $7.5 million in services related to housing. And in addition to the other things that we're doing, we'll be adding an ACT team with MetroCare out at the cottages. We'll be allocating some money for housing support for our serial inebriate program, folks with chronic alcoholism that need some help. We're going to dedicate some money to a housing navigator for the criminal justice system, so we're entering into HMIS and coordinating that thing around. In addition to, we'll still have the $2 million out for support services. Then we're really excited about our Career Smart Justice. We've been invited to apply for significant funding. We're going to do that on the 27th. We hope to get an answer on that very quickly. And we'll allocate $3 million of that over the next 2 years to this front-end diversion stuff, trying to beef up the law enforcement, keep people out of the jail and the hospitals and stable in their community. We will also allocate about $1.7 million of this over 2 years for more ACT teams, support services, and we'll have some money to be part of this solution around landlord incentives and that sort of thing. So that's a real high level of where we're at. We're trying to take ownership of that because these 3 systems are really the one responsible for that.
Great, thank you, Bernadette. I'm going to use that as a springboard into this funding update, I think. So Bernadette,
Yeah, and I think as Ron's talking about the funding update, on our side, the city council is still working on its budget, but there is $1 million additional for all the things that we've been talking about. And I throw it all in one pouch because I don't want to say that we're just going to hire staff. I really would like to see us realign the staff that's working from all the different avenues so that I can flush more of this into that flexible funding for security deposits and things like that that's needed. So $1 million. In addition to that, the state of Texas, the Department of State Health Services, and the county work with us on this particular grant, has availed, it's $2.6 million annually, and it's for Healthy Communities Collaborative, and that suggests both behavioral, mental, health, street outreach, case management, again, possible security deposits out of there and rental assistance. Because they were delayed in issuing last year's money, we actually ended up with $4.1 million for this cycle starting August 1st. And that's matched with private funding, so that deployed $8.2 million into the system for this coming year. That's tremendous resources, and so we want to be very thoughtful, careful about how we deploy that. We did put out a bid for that recently, and those awards were announced last week. And Austin Street is one of the shelters, the Bridge is the other shelter. City Square is going to be the key lead kind of on street outreach, along with MetroCare, Homeward Bound, who am I missing? Turtle Creek, and then there's an addiction center that's also part of the mix. And so that, we believe, will shore up all that street outreach. And so that's where we're going to take that money and kind of plow it in that vein. But then, again, you know, the private money will also start to take care of some of these other things we've been talking about. So that's our update.
What is the reality is we want to get people off the street. If we can take one of these places, sanitize it, put someone in there to look over it, and create a qualified shelter temporarily while we upgrade places that need upgrading. Isn't that money better allocated as a short term on that? Because see right now we have surplus. Surplus over what he told us last time. So if we're running to the bridge and to him and this and that, and these are all routes that you know, obviously myself and her feel what we feel. Why are we not taking the city, the state ownership of it, why are we not taking the city property, leasing it, as David said, putting 100 beds in there, setting it up, letting the churches come and eat there, letting the things happen? Isn't that a better allocation of money than chasing apartments that we know don't exist, and chasing things that we're positive exist?
Absolutely.
So aren't we kind of
Absolutely great idea.
place?
We can approach the state with that particular thought process. To this point, they have not allowed us to use their funding for setting up a shelter or buying extra space. So we can approach them again with that. They really, yeah, they categorize it differently.
Let's be realistic, categorizing not. Are you finding shelter in an apartment?
What is the potential that you see in the program?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're willing they'd be willing to entertain it, I think. Right now, what we've said is, well, what if we buy bed space? So, for example, any of the shelters, and you guys came up with it in the subcommittee, is if there's bed space that can be bought, can we use your money to buy that bed space? And the answer was yes. But when we approached them with, can we build a facility or can we buy a facility, they said no. And we approached that last year, but we can approach. So they would allow us to buy a bed space for a person, not lease a facility.
So if you set up another nonprofit profit organization, just a gun court as it were, and leased it through that, wouldn't that in essence be the same thing? I mean, because I have to do it, it's something that's only up to leave, and then you get money to come that way. So it's
Yeah, again, there's nothing wrong with approaching the state with any of the ideas that we have going forward. It may not be this pot of money, it may be a different pot of money that's more flexible that we could use for that.
Right, I think these are all good ideas, but they all require us to go to the property state. So we do that, I don't think we know what course of action.
But I think whoever ends up on the, this committee to look at sites, that's certainly something that we can start to shore up with data and information to be able to approach them.
I would point out as well as Bernadette said, as maybe those HCC funds require a private match. And so before we can unlock those funds, we have dollars of basis that fund, philanthropic dollars and private dollars, dollars in the system will be matched. So, it would be a shame not be able to leverage those funds, but we don't have the answer today. Where we're going.
Might also add, it's really inefficient to provide those services in small applications. You don't want to have 25 or 40 new small locations spread around town to provide the wraparound services. Transportation, payroll, overhead, you need to have larger facilities to provide the comprehensive suite of services.
There was mention in the documentation or the plans of potential funding for the HMIS system. I don't know if that's a reality or just an ask. We know 3 of the large major shelters came on board with HMIS specifically because VA required it and funded it. And that's been the biggest barrier of resistance to most of our shelters is they have to fund a percentage of their budget for that. So what is that going to look like, and is it going to guarantee the entire shelter either free or low cost? Or is, again, are they having to give over a percentage of what they're awarded in grants to be able to participate on certain projects?
I can respond to some of that. So there are HUD requirements with regard to HMIS to sort of normalize all that data that's captured. And there is private funding and some public funding for the creation of the system and for the adoption and, implementation, but not for fulfillment and execution.
Right.
So there's significant funding right now for what's right in front of us. There's not funding for migration of existing data, which represents everything from fantastic format to literally 3x5 cards in a wet paper sack and everything in between. So you've got to figure out to prioritize time and money to capture the most information, but get going. But going forward, we have an ask, and I think we can raise some private funding to make sure that those agencies that say, yeah, I will participate and I will adopt, they have some support for the next 2-3 years so that they get implemented and then they all are participating. So there's funding for the system, there's funding to adopt it, there's not funding for migration, and there's not enough funding for execution for the smaller agencies.
And that's resistance.
It's,
And so before we said that we have less than 5 minutes of paid left for the meeting, and so we can't receive that.
my presentation is going to be sent around to everybody in the commission. Yes, sir.
To be respectful of this time we throw it open, anybody who has not had an opportunity to say something that they feel like they really say.
Can we at least get next steps in the 5 minutes of the date?
Yes, so let me tell you that currently, we are scheduled to have another one of these meetings on October 18th. What we are proposing, and I think we've had the opportunity to talk to all the subcommittee chairs, is that the subcommittee should, this is your opportunity to get your final word out into the reports. As long as we're operating under the time frame of this room thinking that we're operating under. So if there is anything that you want to get into the report, that you haven't had the opportunity to get into the report, I'd like, my purpose was the subcommittee to get that to us by October 1, so that we can actually get those recommendations into a document back into your hands for the October 18th meeting, give you enough time to review it, make sure that we have been faithful to what you said. The idea for October 18th is to actually go through the report in detail. It'll be a meeting that we actually try to come to consensus in terms of what we are proposing. And then on the current schedule, we will be delivering that final report in November. There's been some suggestion in the room that we need to change that time frame. I don't think we reached any consensus on that. So unless and until we get the opportunity to figure out that the new time frame applies, operate on that schedule, I'm open to any other suggestions as between now and that time. Right?
And Karen, from the data that we've been collecting to support this, this was the first run to show you kind of what's happening across the system and what the need is. The next step that CSH is going to be able to provide is a bit of a financial model of where we could pull resources to respond to the needs. And so we'll have some of that to be able to include in the report as well.
And so we will distribute to the commission PowerPoint presentations we weren't able to show today. I'm sorry for that. And if there's anything else you need from us or from any other commission member, I think we all know how to contact each other.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we might need to have, and it wouldn't have to be an official meeting. I understand all the parameters around this is official and taped and everything. But I just want to be able to address some of the things that we got kind of all over the place with people that have some creative ideas. And I don't know if maybe we just could have a on-the-record meeting with people who had some of these creative ideas to come. I'd be happy to host it myself if needed, so that we could at least get some of those things on paper and captured versus just in the community conversation.
Karen, I could speak to that a little bit. Several of the council members requested that the commission be public. So once we started down this path, you guys would have to, my understanding is, take a consensus vote to have a closed kind of an executive session, if you will. So that didn't happen today, so then your next opportunity to make that happen would be October 18th. And
can I take an existing subcommittee?
We would need a quorum, and so we would need to talk to our attorney and just verify the procedure.
What if the existing shelter subcommittee have one of our regular meetings?
Yes. Now, your subcommittees are free to meet as frequently
and so
as
we
often
can
as
send
they
out
want.
and say that our next subcommittee of the shelter, we're going to look at creative ideas. And then that And so it's not a different meeting, and then anybody else that wanted to come, would that work?
Absolutely. And
Okay,
so
fine.
you
We'll-
can send, if your subcommittee's meeting and you want to open that up to other commission members, send me the
Okay.
dates and when you're meeting, and I can put those all
Okay.
somewhere so you guys can look.
I
at
just
it.
want to be able to get some of that on paper that we at least,
Well, we didn't cover the issue of, or maybe I missed it, of the unused vouchers.
So, we're gonna run out of paper.
So I was gonna say, we also need to cover about half of our agenda, and there's a call over here for additional meetings, and I would agree with that.
Okay, so, we'll take all this under advisement, we'll get back to you, we'll look for the notice of subcommittee.
And I'm just gonna, those commission members that are here, just a couple things to note. The purpose of the community public engagement was to get the voices of the community. And that was why we've limited to the 5 speakers. So in the interest of time, because we know your time is valuable as long as theirs too, as well as theirs too. So just keep that in mind. We can either set this meeting up to have an hour of public speaking at the beginning and 2 more hours in the afternoon. I'm limited on our PIO department, the meeting space to 2 hours. And so, you know, you guys need to keep that in mind. Yes, we are here to hear those voices, but I also want to make the format better so you guys can do work as well. So we can work to address all of that. You know, if you want to make some phone, call me and we can talk through that and I can work with the chairs.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your time.
Yes, please.
Kara, are you going to do that meeting tonight, the 100-something people, the 100 women thing tonight? Are you going? Can I give you, I can't go, can I give you my check?
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.